Greetings, I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast for all the returning listeners and subscribers. Thank you for coming back. To those new to the channel, thank you for taking a moment to check us out. If you dig what we're doing, please hit like and, of course, subscribe. That gesture goes a long way in promoting the channel. Just a brief reminder that if you dig the wide variety of programming we provide here on TIR and you want to make sure we can stay on air, become a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber. When you become a patron or paid YouTube subscriber, you get champagne room and movie night access for as little as $3 a month or a one-time payment of $30 for the year. You get the satisfaction that your small donation goes a long way in keeping TIR on the air. Now, let's get into it. The mysterious case of the doctor and the immigrant wife. Tonight's story doesn't begin with a crime scene. It begins with a marriage, one that slowly bends under the weight of coercion, prescription pads, and institutional indifference. In Okemos, Michigan, Dr. Paul Gregory St. A respected anesthesiologist, once trusted with keeping patients alive on the operating table, now faces recommended criminal charges sparked by allegations that he drugged his wife, Cassandra Fameux, for nearly a decade. Her story reads like a psychological thriller: unprescribed injections, sudden cognitive decline, and a trail of medical records that fail to line up with the life she says she was living. But beneath the surface, beneath the medical terminology, the depositions, the lawsuits, this becomes something more than a domestic abuse case. It becomes a story about power, medical power, racial hierarchies, immigration status, and the credibility gap placed on Black women when they speak out against men with institutional backing. And the journalist who has been relentless in documenting every development, despite being sued by the doctor he's reporting on, is Milton Allimadi of the Black Star News. So tonight, we're talking with Milton about why he took on this story, how he navigated its racial and psychological dimensions, and what this case reveals about who gets believed and who gets protected in the American medical legal system. Please welcome, coming all the way live from the East Coast, Milton Allimadi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for reaching out and upping me on this story. You've written extensively about this case,
Yes.
even under the threat of a lawsuit. Why did this story matter to you, and what initially pulled you into it in the first place?
Okay. Well, a little bit of the history then. I was actually in Grenada for the 40th anniversary commemoration of the brutal murder of the late Maurice Bishop.
Mm-hmm.
And on that same day, the 19th of October, 2023, I get this call from a lady who says, "Mister, if I tell you my husband has been drugging me illegally for a disease I don't have for years, would you believe me?" And typically with calls like that, I say yes. I say, all you need to do is provide me the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So from October the 19th to 2023, up to date, I've been digging into the story. I've been speaking to Cassandra Fameux constantly, at one time almost every day or every other day. And I started getting the documentation and going through the records and the divorce case and his previous divorce of Dr. Paul Gregory St. from 2003, which yielded quite a lot of information. And once I believed that this was a solid story, I told Cassandra that I would report this all the way. And I told her, the people that injured you will be held accountable. And that is the reason why I'm in journalism in the first place. So that's why I've been on top of it. And ironically, I am the only media outlet that's been writing about this case. And you talk about believability. Mm-hmm. And I think at some point, Dr. Sinclair and his advisors and his lawyers concluded that so long as it's only this New York-based, and as they like to say, when the doors are shut, quote unquote ethnic publication is writing about it,
Mm-hmm.
we believe you're on solid ground. But when you're not the New York Times, you have to be creative. You have to make sure that the people that need to realize you're writing about it get to know about it. So I made sure that the people who were involved in this case, in all aspects, got to know what I was writing about. So since they could not log on to the website of the New York Times and read this story, I figured that they should all be getting links to the articles that were being published in the Black Star News. And it gave me the kind of impact that I would have if I were more known as the New York Times is known. You have to be creative in our type of journalism.
Now, you've written for years about media bias and racial hierarchy. How did Cassandra Fameux, am I saying it right? Fameux?
Yes, Fameux.
Fameux, the identity, a Black Haitian immigrant woman, shape the way institutions responded to her?
Well, I wrote a whole book, Manufacturing Hate, How Africa Was Demonized in Western Media. Was I surprised? I think I was surprised to the extent that they're willing to go, to the extent that they're willing to say that at the end of the day, this is a Black woman, a Haitian immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
It's her words against the words of a European American doctor who has been working at this hospital for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And then this ethnic publication in New York City that's writing about it. But the stories were very solid,
Mm-hmm.
factual, based in many instances on his own words and documents from the hospital. For example, he first denied through his lawyer that he had been injecting his wife with the antipsychotic drug called Invega Sustenna at the hospital, University of Michigan Health Sparrow. He denied it in the first article I published. And yet, in the divorce case, he's now admitted that, in fact, he did inject his wife. And of course, he's insisting that he injected her because he asked him to do so. He and a colleague, Dr. Dominic Barberio, also of the same hospital,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Dominic Barberio diagnosed her as schizophrenic with bipolar disorder, which, of course, two psychiatrists eventually, subsequently, both denied, said, no, she is not. She doesn't have schizophrenia. She is not bipolar. She doesn't have bipolar disorder. But he used that as the excuse to inject her. Now, here's the deal. Even though the medical records from Sparrow has his colleague's name on it as the person who was administering the injections, Dr. Barberio,
Mm-hmm.
he himself, the husband, Dr. St. Clair, was the one administering the injections. That alone, just think about that alone. And the hospital thinks this is okay. And I have these documents right here. And up to date, as we speak right now, nobody has been held accountable. Okay, in the case of Dr. St. Clair, eventually the hospital realized that, listen, people are actually reading the story. It may not be in the New York Times, but it's being read. So on the 28th of February, 2024, I started writing my first article, I think November 2023. They terminated him. In the divorce proceedings, he said he was terminated because his wife told the hospital that he had gone into her medical records and altered it. And that's why they terminated him. Now, if he thought the hospital had wrongfully terminated him, I wonder why he never sued the hospital. Obviously because he thinks he can sue me and silence me. He believed I did not have the resources, and I don't have the resources. The hospital, of course, has the resources, especially if he knew they had terminated him for cause. I was only fortunate that I'm able to now fight back legally as well, because I hooked up with a outfit called Lawyers for Reporters in New York City. And they got me, connected me with a big law firm in Detroit. and they took the case pro bono, and the filed that the case should be his lawsuit should be dismissed.
Is the case still pending? The lawsuit against you?
Pending early. It's supposed to be heard early January. And here's the irony about it. So he sues me, saying I falsely published an article stating that he injected his wife with Invega Sustenna. In the divorce case, he admitted that he injected his wife. Why? Because it was so obvious, number one. Number two, there was no way his colleague, I believe, Dr. Barberio, was going to say, no, I am the one who injected, as the medical records. Yeah,
because the records were falsified, right, of who was actually injecting the wife. Because now, who diagnosed her with bipolar disorder in the first place? How does that even start?
Okay, very good. I'm glad you asked that question. I have documentation from the hospital that she was in 2014, and this is when the alleged illegal drugging started. She was diagnosed as anorexic, with depression, with sleep disorder by another doctor at the same hospital. So coming from there to schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, only the husband, the ex-husband now, and Dr. Barberio can explain that. And they should explain that. And of course, she alleges, Cassandra Fameux, that Dr. Barberio misdiagnosed her in order to justify the alleged illegal injections with the antipsychotic drugs. Initially, they medicated her orally with oral drugs from 2014 to 2017. And then in 2017 to 2021, they were injecting her with Invega Sustenna, which is administered by injection. And then at some point, she developed a tumor, a pituitary tumor, brain tumor. She developed a heart condition. Today, she has a loop monitor planted inside her chest.
Oh,
so they claim in the deposition for the divorce case, Dr. Barberio said they stopped injecting her. And mind you, in their mind, they're still arguing that they're injecting her because she has this disease, which, as I said, 2 psychiatrists and Cassandra herself says she does not have. So that's why they were injecting her. And then at some point they stopped when they realized that she had developed a elevated, what is called prolactin level, prolactin, which meant she would have the brain tumor. And then her lawyer at the time, Timothy Young, says, wait a minute, here's evidence showing that you actually did continue injecting her. So caught him, the Dr. Barberio, in a falsehood. So what did he say? He says, oh, yes, we did continue injecting her, but at the minimal level dosage of Invega Sustenna, which is 39 milligrams. But guess what? Some of the injections were administered in the marital residence. And Cassandra alleges that when the husband was mad at her, he would pick up the phone sometimes and call Dr. Barberio, who would come to inject her as punishment at home. And he kept handwritten notes of these visits to inject his wife. And the notes show that she was still being injected at high level of dosage, including 117 milligrams and 156 milligrams. So that was clearly a false statement as well. So now here's the question. If you know that somebody already has a brain tumor, why are you continuing to inject her with high level dosage of a drug for a disease, in any case, which she and 2 psychiatrists have now said she does not have? The key question is, what was your motive? And at some point, they need to answer that question.
Now, he had a previous wife who was also a Black woman. I don't know if she was Haitian. Was she Haitian?
No, she was African American.
Okay, but she was a Black woman.
Yes, she was.
So the doctor has a type. But
she was a doctor as well. And
she had cancer and passed away.
She died of cancer in 2019. what is most interesting in her name was Dr. Marcy Street, was that I went back to look at the court papers for the divorce, which was in 2003. And in that case, he also alleged that she also had mental problems. In fact, he tried to get a PPO, a protective order against her.
Yeah.
He did not get it because she had already gone to court before him and gotten one against him. But the allegations that he made against his second wife, very similar to the allegations that he, well, not allegations, really. It's beyond allegations, because he and his colleagues started, quote unquote, treating her for this mental condition that he and his colleague, Dr. Barberio, claimed she had, which she says she doesn't have, and which two psychiatrists said she does not have. So that was the similarity in that case. And what's also and these are all, by the way, I can speak on this because these are all part of the court record. So anybody interested can go to the, it's called the Ingham County 30th Judicial Court, Circuit Court in Lansing, Michigan. And they should look up the case of Dr. Marcy Street versus Dr. St. Clair. And they will find all these, the information that I'm talking about. So what was interesting in that case is that the housekeeper that they had at that time filed an affidavit and in the court, and it's part of the court record, saying she would be willing to testify to very peculiar behavior by Dr. St. Clair. That, for example, he would ask her questions like, "Oh, does your husband rub your clitoris? I'm feeling very horny. Are you horny?" She would come and find him eating cat food and drinking wine in the morning. And this was very peculiar behavior that concerned her. And then he also allegedly asked her, "Do you think one day your husband could take your life and the life of your children?" And she said she found this very concerning, and she made the wife at that time, Dr. Marcy Street, aware of this information and filed the papers and said she would be willing to testify. And also his own lawyer during that divorce admitted that his client, yes, had multiple extramarital relations. So I bring all of this up because these are the things that he sued me for reporting. That I reported that he injected his wife, that I reported that he had affairs, that I reported that he was being investigated by the Michigan Licensing and Regulatory Authority, when in fact I had a statement from the authority that I quoted, and the authority called me to say that my journalism matched up with what they found in their own independent investigation. Called me on the phone. And yet at the end of the day, that same authority came out with the conclusion that he had done nothing wrong. So that goes back to the establishment and institutional protection that this European American doctor enjoys against his Haitian immigrant wife. If Cassandra was a European American woman, this case would be reported nationally, all over the country, on major media outlets. Her only sin is that, of course, she is a woman of African descent from Haiti.
It is interesting, but another thing is she is alive by the grace of God.
Yes.
Someone's God.
And I would like to speak a little bit on that, but go ahead.
Do you think, though, that there is a dark, this is more of an opinion, right? Do you think that there is a dark side of our curiosity, that these kind of cases only get a certain amount of attention when someone passes on, because it does have the characteristics of something the media would love, right? You have a white doctor,
Yes.
You have a black immigrant woman. He's got a history of liking black women, and they come up dead mysteriously with cancers, and now one has
Right.
a bipolar disorder.
Right.
Is there something where news goes, she's still breathing, so we can't really talk about it. It's not enough for the pages to turn?
No, I would dispute that part.
Okay.
But I like what you said initially when you itemize the issues that are involved. The biggest question is, why would this not be reported? Just think about that. Why did not even the local newspaper and write an article after the police finally issued the report that should be prosecuted? But let me go back to the question that you just posed in terms of she is alive. Now, let me give you the factual circumstance. I started writing in November 2023. Dr. St. Clair was suspended shortly, maybe 2 weeks after my first article came out. The article had a lot of other factual issues that I think I would be better off suggesting that people go and read the article itself. But it was solid enough with the information that it had, with the documentation, for the hospital to suspend him about 2 weeks after it came out. I wrote 2 additional articles, the third one being on January the 25th, 2024. On January the 26th, 2024, I believe he, let me not characterize it. Let me put it this way.
Sure.
The police had to come to the marital residence. And he claimed that the wife, had attacked him. And the police report states that they examined and there was no signs that, he had been injured or any, to support his allegation that she had attacked him. And mind you, he's a big, tall guy, right? So anyway, let's say those were his words, his allegations. And he also told the police that she's been diagnosed as schizophrenic, right? Obviously, going by the alleged false diagnosis made by his colleague, Dr. Barberio. So based on his words, the police took her to University of Michigan Health Sparrow, the same hospital where she alleges she had been abused, because those injections were, by the way, monthly, every month.
Yeah.
From 2017 to 2021. They take her back there, and she claims at some point she managed to get to the phone, because I was speaking to her every day at that time. And then I hadn't heard for like 3 days or so, maybe 4 days. And I was concerned. And then she called me and said she's calling from a payphone in the hospital, and explained to me how she ended up being there. And said when she got there, at one point, they tied her to a bed, and they were injecting her in her legs. She doesn't know with what. And at one point, a female hospital employee, maybe a nurse, came and took her picture when she was completely in the nude, with a male guard standing right there in the room as well.
Wow.
So I was so concerned, I contacted, of course, the hospital spokesperson immediately. But at this point, I had elevated it to the level of the president of University of Michigan Health Sparrow. Every time I contacted them, I would make sure I copied the office of the president. Santa Ono was his name at that time. And I said, these are the allegations she's making. And I imagine the hospital has cameras. And so could you respond to this? Is this true? And can you verify it by going and looking at the camera, the monitors that you should have? And that should establish whether she's speaking the truth or not. So they did not respond to that. But here's my number one concern now. Because now it's clear to me that at least this is my impression, that Dr. St. Clair, the husband, did not have good intentions for her, okay? And it became a priority to get her out of that establishment. And I'll be frank with you. I started thinking about the Jack Nicholson character in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right?
Okay. Yeah.
She will never be able to articulate her story again.
Yeah.
Had those fears I had materialized.
Yeah.
So I have a radio show on WBAI. I urged people to call the hospital. I gave the phone number. I gave the name of the president of the hospital. She was released the next day. They took her from there to a mental hospital. And she managed to call me from there at some point again. So now she's in a different location. And I would call her back. And at some point, they recognized my voice. They stopped relaying my communication to her. So I got a female friend of mine in New York to call her and tell her to call me. And that's how we would communicate, through my other friend, because now I realize the hospital is blocking me. So I mounted a similar campaign as they had done to get her freed from the hospital, because she's telling me that I'm being held here against my will, and being medicated against the will. And I mounted the same campaign again on the radio and on social media. She was released, I believe, the next day again. In this interim period, Dr. St. Clair had gone, and this time he got a PPO, protective order, against her. So now she's out of the marital house. So she spends several days sleeping in her car, and then eventually she gets her own apartment. And I bring this up to say that had I not made that intervention and promoted it on social media, who knows where she might have been.
The hardest thing to do, and I don't know if people really understand this unless you've been in the mental health system, is never tell someone you're sane, because you sound crazy when you try to tell people you're sane, and they're going to lock you up even more. It's really hard to get phone calls out.
Yes.
It's very, very difficult. So the maneuvering that woman had to do, because it's a scary feeling to be.
Yes, the maneuvering to get able to call me on the payphone, to, yeah. So obviously at that point, there was no going back. There was no way I could drop this story at any point until we went to the very end. Well, we're talking about the mental issue. Let me add one other thing at this point.
Sure.
Dr. St. Clair's own sister told the first lawyer who represented Cassandra in the divorce case, Janet Hamilton, that in fact, he was the one who was treated for schizophrenia when he was in medical school. In the deposition for the divorce, the second lawyer, the third lawyer, I believe, representing Cassandra, asked him, Timothy Young asked him about his past mental health diagnosis, and he refused to speak about it, even though he answered the question about the cat food. And he said it was actually dog food that he tried, not cat food.
Not better. It's not better, Doc.
He said, yeah, of course, he's, something like he's nibbled it occasionally. It's not like I have it for lunch, he said. And he said, I never said I was horny. Maybe she misheard me. Maybe I said I was hungry. And he denied that he drank the wine because he claims he doesn't even have a jug, as the housekeeper claimed, you see. But he refused, and it's in the transcripts of the deposition. Timothy Young said, well, I wanted on the record as that you refused to answer a question about your mental health diagnosis, even though a relative of yours had brought up that issue, something like that. So the things I speak about, they sound incredible, but they're in black and white, and they're part of the court documentation now.
Well, again, that's why you're here, because it's crazy. The story is so insane sounding. Yes. And the wife also believes, Miss Fameux also believes that the judge involved is problematic as well, correct?
No, it's beyond problematic. The judge actually engaged in fraud. And I don't know if what the judge did,
Mm-hmm.
somebody else did it, it would be characterized as a crime. So if the law is to be applied equally, then she engaged in a crime. And let me give the quick summary here of this.
Sure.
Because Cassandra alleges, and her lawyer also alleged, Timothy Young, in court papers, that the whole reason for fabricating the alleged disease of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder was to incapacitate her by the injections, the medication, and make her sign what is called a judgment of separate maintenance that transferred millions of dollars, and basically 90% of marital assets, 90% millions of dollars to Dr. St. Clair, the 2 marital homes they had to Dr. St. Clair, and it named Dr. Barberio, the alleged accomplice, as the psychiatrist who would determine her mental health and whether she was fit enough to co-parent the 3 children they had, who were all minors at that time. So she signed that agreement on February the 20th, 2018. Here's a bunch of problems with that. Number one, she had a quote-unquote guardian, her sister, Jenny Smith. Guess who petitioned the court to have Jenny Smith be appointed as the guardian?
Don't say the husband.
Yes, the husband, Dr. St. Clair. And who signed the papers, the documents? The husband's lawyer, Jessica Larson. Okay, that's item number one. Item number two, the lawyer who advised Cassandra Fameux during the negotiations for the JOSM, Judgment of Separate Maintenance. His name is Robin Omar. In 2003, Robin Omar was the law partner of Jane Radner. Mm-hmm. Guess who Jane Radner's lawyer, guess who her client was?
Don't say the husband.
Yes, Dr. St. Clair was Jane Radner's client during his 2003 divorce. And the court allowed this. But here's the most critical aspect, and where we come back to the judge who issued the final divorce decree on November the 3rd, 2025. Mm-hmm. Judge Carol Koenig in the Michigan's 30th Judicial Circuit Court. Since Cassandra was adjudged as incompetent in 2015, automatically the court had to appoint her a guardian ad litem, right? Mm-hmm. Before she could enter into a contract such as the judgment of separate maintenance. What was appointed was an attorney guardian ad litem, Melissa Leckie. Critical difference. An attorney guardian ad litem handles the affairs of the minor children in divorce proceedings. The court never appointed a guardian ad litem. And all these lawyers who represented her in the divorce must have known that. And that motion alone would have rendered the judgment of separate maintenance null. According to Michigan law, she had to have been appointed a guardian ad litem. So the lawyer that finally brings up that issue is the last lawyer she had in these proceedings, Lisa Stern. In her motion of May the 22nd, 2025, she says, Your Honor, in her papers, no guardian ad litem was appointed, which means, according to Michigan law, this thing is void. There's basically no agreement. Mm-hmm. So I think the judge realizes that. So what did the judge do? In her ruling, in the transcripts of her ruling of September the 3rd, 2025, she states that Cassandra was represented by a guardian who was her sister, by an attorney who represented her interests, who was, of course, the partner of his own firm or attorney in 2003, but most importantly and falsely claimed she was also represented by a guardian ad litem. And of course, she does not mention the name of the guardian ad litem because none existed, right?
Mhm.
And she also excerpts from a transcript from a proceeding from 2017 when another judge named Lawless was the one presiding over the case. Judge Lawless is now retired, right? And that transcript has an exchange between Dr. St. Clair and his lawyer, Jessica Larson. And the question is something like, oh, so have you and your wife and her guardian ad litem discussed, blah, 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 blah? And his response was yes. So now Judge Koenig uses that as proof that there's a guardian ad litem. Otherwise, who would have Jessica been asking about, and who would have Dr. St. Clair been talking about when he said yes? So I went back and I looked at the original transcript from 2017. I asked for it from the court, right? And it turns out that Cassandra was not there for that proceeding. And even the lawyer, Robin Omar, who used to be the law partner of the husband's lawyer from 2003, he himself was not in court on that day as well. Otherwise, somebody reading the transcript would have said, wait a minute, if you're representing her, why did you not object? Knowing that there's no guardian ad litem, this is a false, a fictitious conversation that was occurring. But here's the most important thing. Why did Judge Lawless allow it into the court record when she knew that no guardian ad litem had been appointed? And by the way, Judge Lawless is the same judge who presided over Dr. St. Clair's 2003 divorce. So she knows also the peculiar nature, because after all, she read the affidavit by the lady who had said he did all these things that I talked about earlier on.
The naked cat food guy. Yeah.
Yep.
What, from your reporting, what appears to be the motive then? He's the one that controls the money, it sounds like.
He controls the money.
Did his wife work?
His wife did not work because she took care of the 3 children that they had, and she also took care of the 2 children he had from the previous second wife after she joined the Ancestors. So basically, and this is what one of her lawyers also told her, and which is very obvious, of course, she knew it. He essentially kept her as an enslaved person. And why do I say that? Because the judgment of separate maintenance was signed in 2018. He did not file for divorce until 2023. And at some point, he was having an affair with a married nurse that works at the hospital. And yet he also still had Cassandra as his legal wife. So Timothy Young, her third lawyer in the divorce, before the judge said, okay, first of all, he said the judgment should be voided because it was obtained through fraud. His client had been medicated and her judgment was impaired. She didn't know what she was signing. So the judge denied that motion, right? He didn't bring up the issue of the guardian ad litem, which of course, that would avoid the thing. But he brought up another issue. He said, okay, so she signed the agreement in 2018, but you remain married 2019, 20, 21, 22, 23, 5 years. Therefore, she's entitled to whatever marital assets accumulated over the 5 years, right? And in the deposition, he said, so did you not continue to sleep on the same bed and have sex with your wife? And he said, well, if that happened, it would have been very, very rarely. And then he also asked, how do you define sex? And the judge denied the motion to set it aside, but the judge went further, as I just said a few minutes ago. At the end of the day, had to fabricate evidence in order to sustain the same judgment of separate maintenance, which, of course, she should have ruled void once she was challenged by the fact that no guardian ad litem had ever been appointed. That was the end of the case right there. Instead, she ruled in favor of Dr. St. Clair, sustained the judgment of separate maintenance, issued the final decree for divorce. So Dr. St. Clair walks away with all the gains from the judgment of separate maintenance, and Cassandra walked away with the brain tumor, with the heart condition, with the diabetes, and she also alleges excessive bleeding started occurring because of the side effects of the drugging. So she had to have surgery. She had excessive monthly bleeding, and the surgery left her infertile. So she can't even have kids now.
And she is considerably younger than the doctor.
Yes, she was in fact 23 when they first met. She had come to the hospital to volunteer because she was interested in nutrition, and she said eventually she wanted to go to medical school. And he was anesthesiologist at the hospital, 28 years her senior. So he was 51, I believe, when they met.
Is this another one of those problems that makes cases like this, I don't want to say difficult, but makes it a little more, how can I put this? You see an older man with a younger woman, and a lot of people assume the younger woman is extremely manipulative. 51-year-old man, 23-year-old woman, not from this country. People are going to go, oh, we know what that's all about.
Right.
So it's probably going to be a little harder to explain when there's problems.
Right.
And in this case, you have a situation where it almost sounds like the way you're describing the guy is he kind of like banging the help, so to speak.
Yes.
And if the help got mouthy, he had ways to silence them. And he has institutional protection.
Institutional protection, the financial, disparity, the age disparity. This is a person who had an accent, was still learning English at that time, relatively, and without many friends. And according to, as Young framed it in the court papers, basically took advantage of her, started out as somebody who was a friend, and then as he outlines in the court papers, in the motion to dismiss the judgment of separate maintenance, says he basically groomed her, started off as a friend, come to me with your needs, and then it developed into a physical relationship. And as he also outlines in the court papers, filed October 22, 2024, at some point she became pregnant and he wanted her to have an abortion.
Oh.
He offered her $80,000 and she refused, said because of her Catholic faith, she would not do that. And she says that he even had a lawyer approach her and said, that she might be deported, back to Haiti if she didn't agree. But she ended up having the child. And then after she had the child, and then he worked his way back into the relationship. They ended up having a second child. And then when she was about to have the third child is when they got married and she moved into the marital property. And as she has outlined and alleged and also told the police, ultimately, she finally went to the police in Meridian County Police in Okemos in Michigan and explained what I've been discussing today on the show and said it actually started by him allegedly spiking an energy booster that she used to take. She was very fit. You could tell photos from the past, this very attractive woman in good shape. You could also could have been a model. You could see if you saw her picture in those days. And she said she would mix cayenne pepper in water and then drink it as an energy booster before going to the gym.
Mm.
And then at some point, she started, her heart would start racing, her hair would start dropping off, falling off. And she became concerned. And she said she told her husband, Dr. Sinclair, that she's going to send this to be tested. He thinks it might be toxic or something. And then suddenly, she couldn't find it anywhere. She couldn't find it, so she couldn't even take it for testing. And then she alleges, the husband said, you basically have a sleep disorder, and started giving her medication every night. And she does not remember what pill it was, to help her with her sleep, allegedly. And from there on, things just became worse. And that's how she started the engagement with the hospital system. So that is a summary of it. So, and if it was only a simple issue of, yes, was this some sort of a gold digger, limited story, but given all the other issues that I've outlined, well documented, it seems like it goes way beyond that.
It took nearly 10 years for the police to recommend charges. What does that timeline tell us about the credibility barriers that Black women face when reporting harm, especially harm inflicted by high-status white men?
Yeah. I think that is the answer to the question that you just posed. Mm-hmm. That is the answer to the question. And so 2 points on this police issue. Number one, there never would have probably been an investigation that led to the recommendation that he be prosecuted. The police sent that recommendation to the prosecutor, John DeWayne, the Ingham County prosecutor, and he's so far rejected that recommendation to prosecute Dr. Sinclair. Why do I say he never would have been investigated? Because it was the words of a Black, quote unquote, crazy woman against the words of an established doctor. Because people that see him do not know the things that were said in the court papers that I just explained a few minutes ago. That the housekeeper was willing to say XYZ. Mm-hmm. If you see him just as a doctor, how would you know the housekeeper had been willing to say those things? You see? So you have him versus this, and you already have all these vile stereotypes against Haitians, first of all, right? Mm. So that was the narrative. And as she alleges, whenever they had a fight and the husband called the police, they would come and they would always take his side. You see? Mm. So what would make them now have a reversal and think, wait a minute, she might be telling the truth? That was only possible because I kept doing the reporting. And I kept asking them questions, the police. I would send them many email questions. And then I think they started seeing that, wait a minute, this woman that we've been regarding as a crazy Black woman may be onto something. Why would this person risk publishing this as a news article if it was incorrect? Why would he publish that the licensing authority is investigating him and even quote the licensing authority people? I think when they started seeing that, it started shifting their mindset toward her. Mm-hmm. And then finally, after she got out of the marital home, after the interventions that I explained that I was involved in making, and she had her own apartment, she started seeing, and all these years, by the way, Dr. Barberio had been her psychiatrist, see? The husband's colleague. So every month she was visiting Dr. Barberio, as her psych, in addition to the husband accompanying her to inject her in his office. But now she's seeing an independent psych. So she stopped seeing Barberio after I started writing my articles and got her to leave the marital home. Not out of choice, of course, because the husband got her sent to the hospital, but of course she never went back. So he might have actually done her a favor, you see?
Mm-hmm.
So she started visiting a different psychiatrist and a social worker pretty much on a weekly basis in an organization called Community Mental Health. It's a state agency in Lansing. And the social worker accompanied her when she went to make this report to the police on September the 10th, 2024. So obviously now they have to pay attention to her. See, now they can't treat her like this quote unquote crazy black woman as they previously had been doing. And I got a copy of that presentation. I got the video, and she was very articulate and knew what she was talking about. And the social worker also augmented parts of it, because by now she had been meeting with them for like many months and they were familiar with her story. And the psychiatrist testified on her behalf in the divorce case that she does not have schizophrenia or mental disorder. And there was an attempt to prevent the psychiatrist and the social worker from testifying. On one occasion, they were brought in on via Zoom, and they were kept in the waiting room, I believe, for like 2 hours by the judge.
That's insane.
But they insisted, and finally they testified in person, because that disrupts the narrative. You see, how do you have a psychiatrist testifying in court and saying, no, this woman does not have? That would mess up Dr. St. Clair's and Dr. Barberio's narrative, right?
Does she have custody of the children right now?
Okay, that's one of the most painful aspects, of the whole thing. There's only one minor child now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a standing court order, 50-50 custody. Weekly rotation of visits, right?
That's rough.
She has not seen this minor child since August, because the husband has just decided not to allow her weekly or the child's weekly visits with the mother to occur.
Mm-hmm.
And the court has done nothing to enforce that. And obviously, because the psychiatrist testified in the divorce that she does not have schizophrenia, but she has PTSD.
PTSD, yeah.
Yeah, as a result of the many years of the abusive marriage. So now, withholding that child has triggered her PTSD as well. And at one time, I think it was in maybe July, she actually needed to be hospitalized for a few weeks for that. So now he might use that and say, see?
Told you.
That's why I'm not, but you can't do that unless there's a change in the existing court order. As it stands right now, it is 50-50. And in any case, if I'm in her position, this would be my response. So you would deny visitation that is 50-50 in the court order and allow the child to remain with the father, whom the police have now recommended be criminally charged because he had been allegedly poisoning the mother for 8 years. So which one do you prefer?
Wherever you guys are watching or listening to this show later, there is a link in the description to Milton's article on this story. It's a long article, but it goes into everything he's been talking about. And there's definitely images of the people involved, as the thumbnail is not the people involved on purpose. And also there's images and links to a lot of the legal documents as well. From a narrative
I also actually have launched a change.org campaign as well.
Oh, okay. Well, send that to me. I'll link it as well.
Absolutely. And we have, I think there are now about 370 signatures, and people are basically asking the prosecutor, Dwayne, why has he rejected the police recommendation that he filed criminal charges against Dr. St. Clair? Number one. Number two, is also asking for Governor Whitmer to appoint a special prosecutor so he can evaluate the case independently.
Now, I guess in closing, I want to ask, from a narrative standpoint, this case feels like something out of a psychological horror film.
Yeah.
Medication manipulation, gaslighting, professional expertise turned into a weapon.
Yeah.
When you were reporting this, did it feel like a domestic violence story, a medical ethics story, or just something else more sinister?
No, beyond domestic violence, because I started off by trying to verify, is it true that a doctor and his colleague was actually medicating? Why not just divorce?
Yeah, it's easy.
People divorce.
Yeah.
Why are you medicating somebody for in a disease that she allegedly does not have? So that really changed my outlook. This is not your normal marital dispute. You see? And once, I could not get a denial from the hospital. And once I got a denial from Dr. St. Clair that he never injected his wife, and then after him and his lawyers, I presume, went through it, realized that that narrative would not be sustainable, because then if you didn't inject her, and if the reporter has documentation that she was being medicated, somebody was injecting her. And I don't see why Dr. Barberio would agree to volunteer that he was the one who was doing it. So I think after they went through their own discussions, they realized that narrative was not sustainable. So the first time he admitted that he injected her was in response to an interrogatory I think it was in February of 2024, sent, where you respond in writing to questions. This came from the questions came from the second lawyer. I think his name is Ben Folger. And in one of his responses, he responded that he injected his wife occasionally because she asked him to inject, because as a trained anesthesiologist, it would hurt less if he did it. You see? So that's the rationale, right? But Dr. Barberio, in the divorce deposition, said he injected his wife 90% of the time. So it was not a matter of occasionally. And he also committed perjury, it seems. And the judge, Koenig, didn't care about that. Dr. Barberio said he never injected Cassandra in his office, right?
Yeah.
But when he testified, and of course, Dr. Barberio was not there when Dr. St. Clair testified. I think it was in December 11, 2024. He said he injected his wife occasionally when she asked, because it didn't hurt that much. And she said that in the presence of Dr. Barberio, and he would be able to verify that, right? And the rest of the time, the injections were by Dr. Barberio himself and his two nurses. And that's not true. Dr. Barberio never injected, so he committed perjury. And I brought that up in one of the articles. That didn't matter to Judge Koenig. But I didn't know she would go as far as actually fabricating evidence, as I discussed earlier.
Yeah.
And that's where things stand. So you earlier said, oh, she's alive. I don't know the condition of her health. I don't know what damages those years of injections ultimately might do. The state of the brain tumor. I think at one point, he cut off her health insurance, so she couldn't even go now to have it monitored. She's supposed to be able to go every 6 months, something like that. I don't know the condition of the heart condition. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, she's alive, but is she fully alive?
Well, one of the commenters, Connor, says, first of all, this sounds like a real feat of journalism and speaks to why the profession is so important. And it is stories like this that, like you said, the New York Times isn't talking about. No one's talking.
Detroit Free Press, in fact, at some point, and I won't name the editor, there's an editor of the Detroit Free Press. I would keep that editor posted and would copy that editor sometimes when I wrote, because sometimes I would write to the judge, write to the governor, write to the state attorney general, send them links to the story. I would copy this editor as well. At some point, this editor blocked me.
He got tired of the truth. Okay, I get it. I dropped the ball.
And the local paper in Lansing,
Mhm.
you know, these papers, they pretend to be papers. They prefer to just print press releases. None of them have done a single story about this. And let me actually, before I forget,
Yeah. Mhm.
I was not supposed to get this police report.
Ah.
The police report was prepared in April. I did not know about it until August. And I didn't do my story about the police report until September. Why did I not know? Because when I initially did the Freedom of Information Act,
Mhm.
the police sent me the recording of the video of when Cassandra went with a social worker on September 10, 2024, and she filed that criminal complaint. So when I did another FOIA, maybe in August now, the police came back and told me, oh, we already sent you that information. That's all we had. So I said, okay. So I'm doing an article, and in my article, I wrote this to police chief. I'm going to say that Cassandra reported this criminal allegation in September 2024.
Mhm.
It's now almost a year later, August 2025, and you did not even interview the alleged suspect, the husband. And that's the article I'm going to be publishing. And I sent it to the police chief, and I copied the governor, and I think the state attorney general. Lo and behold, the next day, they said, oh, they thought they had sent me the supplemental report.
Oops.
And that supplemental report was the 13-page police report with a recommendation that he be criminally charged. So had I not even done that extra, as I said, you have to be creative when you're not the New York Times. Had I not informed them that I'm doing an article saying you never investigated or interviewed the alleged suspect and copied that to the governor, I might not even know today that there had ever been a police report recommending that he be criminally charged.
Insane. What are you working on next?
I think I have to catch my breath from this one first. Or actually, I'll give you another one I did.
Sure.
That I'm going to probably be polishing again. You know, now there's a big story about the the Somali.
I was going to
immigrant.
ask you something about Somalia.
Right.
I wanted to ask you about
Right.
Uganda and Somalia, so I will shut up now while you explain.
I did a column. I did two columns a couple of months ago. Number one, the state of Minnesota, the governor, threw the Somalis under the bus. There's a state agency, the Minnesota Department of Education. They're supposed to monitor that program. Had they done their job, there would never have been any single case of that, the food program scam would not have occurred, right? In fact, a state agency did an audit and wrote a report, literally saying the same thing. Had the Department of Education done its job, none of this fraud would have occurred. They did not. So I wrote that, number one. Number two, something wasn't adding up. So I also asked for documentation from the Minnesota Department of Education. And I'm the only one so far, I believe, who wrote that they had an incentive to not monitor the program aggressively because they also got a cut of the money. So every year they got on average about $8 million.
Wow.
So over a 4-year period of when the scandal was ongoing, they got almost $40 million out of it. So obviously, the governor is not going to make this, front page news when in fact it should be.
Mm-hmm.
So they prefer to just throw the Somalis under the bus and say, oh, all of them are the usual suspects. No, accountability actually starts with the governor. That column is out.
Mm-hmm.
I sent it to one or two reporters whom I respect. I hope they take it and they run with that. So, in fact, they demonize the Somali immigrants so they could take the full blame for this food program scandal. And now, of course, Trump has turned it toxic, you see? So now the state is caught between a rock and a hard place. Now are you on the same side with Trump now, demonizing the Somalis?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you going to say, wait, no, it couldn't be true. They're not like that. Well, so why did you demonize them in the first place before Trump became involved? It's a total mess.
Are you hearing about these stories where people are also getting kind of they're canceling? What is when you become a citizen, the last thing is it the swearing in ceremony? Is that what it is?
Yes.
So they're canceling some swearing in ceremonies because people are getting arrested as swearing in ceremonies.
Absolutely.
Are you hearing that as well?
Yes, absolutely. I am.
Oh.
I am.
And what are you guys doing about it? Is it happening in New York as much, or did they leave New York? Did the ICE people?
In New York, the cases are not as other parts of the country, but let's see what happens. I mean, I know a few people who have not yet been called for their interviews, and they're very concerned now.
Yeah,
they're wondering whether they should even bother going. I know somebody who's thinking of leaving the country.
They fired a judge. They fired a judge the day she was giving people their citizenship. They fired a judge.
Yeah.
I
tell people that, you have to see it as a system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trump is not an individual, so it's very disingenuous to say, this is Trump. This is the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Desperate capital lashing out. The kind of lashing out that we saw in the 60s, oh, wait a minute, you're going to have my European kids in the same classroom with Negro children? Oh, no, Well, this guy did not fall, right? This country is being superseded now by major power, China, and there are other emerging centers of power now that are coming. So the gatekeepers, the establishment of this country, they're just lashing out. I think, history moves in a certain direction. This is like trying to push back the tide of history. Obviously it's disruptive, it's terrifying, it's painful to many people. Many people are going to be hurt, but at the end of the day, it's part of a historical process,
I mean, I hope these aren't precedents because,
No, I mean, it will happen. I'm not saying that the next person who comes after this president might be vastly better. Could be worse, but still it's a process that can't go backward. At the end of the day.
You're saying Trump's let a genie out of the bottle, so to speak, with an amount of cruelty, amount of what you can do.
But look, the millions that voted for him, you see?
Yeah.
You see? And I think many of those that now see what they voted for, I think some are having, I think at the end of the day, there are only two choices, right? I think it's impossible to disrupt it for everybody else, especially the working people, and think you can have a good time at it, So the second option is to realize that history does not go in reverse. We have to learn to live with people that are different from us, people that come from, different backgrounds, different cultures. And, and part of the narrative is that they don't even realize that a lot of the people that come here is because of their economies being disrupted by
here.
Capital.
Yeah.
Capital coming from here.
Do you see a difference in the Obama administration's, because Trump still can't hit Obama numbers when it comes to deporting people, the Obama administration's deportation efforts?
And it was not so much the deportation. I think the toxic, level of vitriol coming from such a powerful office,
yeah,
like the White House, And I guess that would be the distinction, you see?
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. When we talk about the numbers, no. But listen, let's not forget also that it was under Obama's watch that Libya was destroyed by NATO, sometimes so I think, and that's why to me now I'm very reluctant to look at the individuals, look at the office, the presidency of the United States. No matter who you are, you will be fulfilling a U.S. hegemonic agenda, unless we, and which reminds me of two things actually I'd like to say. One, many years ago, one of my favorite late African leaders, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, was asked by an American journalist. After he said, Nyerere said, the world and the United States would be a much better place if the United States had an opposition party. And the reporter said, Mr. President, what do you mean? We have the Democrats and Republicans. And Nyerere said, that's the problem. They're both capitalists and they're both imperialists. And then the reporter understood. And then the second thing I like to say is this. I had, he's elder now, so I haven't seen him in a couple of years now. He's in his 90s now. But this is something that this, friend told me when he was in his late 70s, I believe. He's a billionaire. And I like telling my friends, he liked sharing his thoughts with me, but, not a dime of the world. But he told me, he said, Milton, this country will have upheavals, and I would not be surprised if it becomes like revolution. And I was like, wait, why is this wealthy person offering this unsolicited, I said, why do you say this? He said, because when I started making my money in the 1980s, there was a middle class in this country. People could have a decent job, pay off their loans, pay off their children's education, pay off their homes, and retire with money. Now, people need 2-3 jobs just to survive. He said, you cannot have a society where you only have people like me talking about himself and everybody else. He said, that is unsustainable and it will not be sustained. And you know what they're going to try to do? And it's not going to work at the end of the day. They're going to try to use the military. This is a wealthy person foreseeing Trump. And this is something he told me like 15 years ago, maybe. So some of the very wealthy who know what's going on, right? They know it, you see? And he said, it's not going to work. He said, at some point, you're going to have simultaneous uprisings, multiple cities. And then what are you going to do? He said, finally, it may not happen in his lifetime. And as I said, he's in his 90s now. I think it's like 93. But it's possible in your lifetime. Talking about me.
It does feel like we're getting to that point.
Yeah. So I wanted to close on a note. This is something that I found very interesting at that time. And the more I think about that conversation, the more I realize, wow.
Well, Milton, again, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me this evening. I really appreciate you. And we would love to have you back on the show again. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you. And have a very good rest of your evening. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. Dr. Milton Allimadi. Again, wherever you're watching or listening to the show, there should be a link in the description to Milton's story. If not, I will put one in there right now. And I will see you guys on Saturday. And let's go out with Quinn's new outro. I just love the outro, even though it's not for this particular show. And when you guys watch the show Sunday with Quinn and Stefan, be like, Quinn, you need to give the main show a new outro. Just keep ribbing him, and maybe he'll do it. Thank you, guys. Have a very good night.
Start eating that trash can.
I already am eating from the trash can all the time.